Thank you for joining us today. We're the Central Texas Mycological Society, a member-supported nonprofit. And so this is actually for our Healthy Soils, Healthy Trees program, which is supported by the City of Austin's Urban Forestry Grants. I'm April, and I am a researcher with the Healthy Soils, Healthy Trees program. So we are actually going to be we've been running research for the past 3 years, and we're starting 2 new research projects. So this is going to be the second one. The first one, we're going to be looking at commercial inoculants. And if you don't know what an inoculant is, Danielle over here will thoroughly explain that during this presentation. So we're going to be planting trees with tree folks and looking at using different commercial inoculants, and we're going to be looking at germination rate, tree health, soil health, and drought tolerance of 3 native trees. So we're going to be looking at the bald cypress, the red oaks, and the Texas mountain laurel. So we're starting that off. We're actually going to be mixing the soil on Tuesday. And then, so this one is going to be looking at native inoculants. So we're actually going to be growing the inoculants with y'all here. So that's really cool that y'all are here. Y'all are starting off this research project. We're going to be using the same trees, the same setup. So we're going to be growing the grass this year, and then next year we're going to be planting those trees. And that's also going to be with tree folks as well, looking at the same metrics, same timeline. And so just so very thankful y'all are here to participate with us in this wonderful community science project. If you have any questions or need to know any more, ask any of us, and we will also be posting updates on the website. So yeah, thanks y'all, and I will pass it over to Danielle, who will tell you some really, really cool stuff. Thank you.
Sweet. Hi, everybody. Cool. Okay. Hi. It's so cool to see so many people who are nerdy about fungi, but also this one really specific type of fungi that are some of my favorites. So yeah, today we're talking about mycorrhizal fungi specifically. These are fungi that live in relationships with plants. And so most plants on Earth have the potential to form these mycorrhizal relationships. So it's something like, I keep seeing the number go up as we continue to study these magical fungi. So I think it's like now maybe 95% of all plants form these relationships. So if you work with plants in any way, it's really good to know about these mycorrhizal fungi. And yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about the different types of mycorrhizal fungi to start, and then why you might want to incorporate them. Do you need to incorporate them? Do you not need to? And then we're actually going to dive into how to cultivate native mycorrhizal fungi. So as part of this Healthy Trees project, but then also you'll have a handout with the methods kind of broken down and distilled so that you can also apply this as you wish. And yeah, I'll just say a bit about me. I have a background in agriculture and permaculture. Also run a mushroom, like a spawn business called DIY Fungi for over a decade, and do a lot of cultivation of like native fungal strains of different types. Yeah, and then mostly I've worked with fungi for cleaning up pollution inland and ecological restoration as well as in agriculture. So I'm kind of drawing on all of that in trying to share these very DIY methods for growing out native mycorrhizal fungi. And this is something I do every time I move to a new place. I go and dig up plant roots and try to see whether all these new plants are mycorrhizal or not. And yeah, they usually are. So I've done this. I moved here from Southern California. Pretty much every desert plant has a mycorrhizal fungus helping it survive in the desert. Same if you go to, I mean, I've done this in like the Alps, and I'm from Canada. I've done it like all different parts of Canada. So these fungi are everywhere, and these are some really fun kind of tools to have to learn about the natural world around you. So first of all, I guess, how many folks are familiar with mycorrhizal fungi specifically? Okay, so you know mostly the basics. So there's, yeah. April, yes, that's awesome. Yeah, that is really exciting. So myco means fungal, right? As you know, rhizal related to roots. So this is super important. If you're even just going to buy inoculum and apply it, it's important to understand that these fungi form relationships through the roots of plants. So you need to have that root contact for them to be able to form that relationship. Like I said, they're found all over the world, literally all over the world, even in wetlands and aquatic environments, you'll find mycorrhizal fungi. Yeah, deserts, any extreme environment, you're definitely going to find them. And yeah, there's many different types, but today we're going to focus on the two main types that are relevant for folks working with land or plants. And those are arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and ectomycorrhizal fungi. So printed out some pictures because we're outside here, but I really wanted y'all to get to see this. So ectomycorrhizal fungi, the white you're seeing around, I think this is like a grape root, that's the fungus. So ecto means outside of. So ectomycorrhizae form these kind of sheaths outside of the root, and that's where they do their trading with the plant. Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi actually penetrate into the root, and that's where they do their trading. So this picture, what you're seeing, there's been a blue stain applied to a plant root to reveal the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus inside. If any of you speak French, you might recognize arbuscular sounds kind of like arbole, like tree. So arbuscules kind of look like little trees inside of plant roots, and they're kind of like a little marketplace, if you will, where the fungus is trading with the plant. So what are mycorrhizal fungi trading with their plant partner? Anyone know? Nutrients, yeah. Are there any major nutrients that they trade mostly? You're right that sugars are involved, but actually the sugar is what the plant gives to the fungus. So yeah, this trade relationship, so the plant photosynthesizes, creates carbon, sugar, essentially, and sends it down to the mycorrhizal fungi to trade the carbon that the fungus needs for nutrients. So if we're talking about arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, the major nutrient that they're providing access to is phosphorus. So that's a major, obviously, oh my goodness, the puppy. Sorry.
This is my foster puppy. She's up for adoption. So sorry we're late.
No, thank you for bringing this adorable puppy. Okay, back on track. So phosphorus is a major, like a macronutrient that plants need, right? But it's actually not very soluble often. It's in a form often in soil that makes it kind of hard for plants to access. So what's cool about these mycorrhizal fungi, oh, I can't even look at it. Okay. Is that they have the ability to solubilize, to make phosphorus in a form that then they can trade with their plant partner. So yeah, they make nutrients available to their plant partners. What else? Water. Yeah, and this is like epic. So like, yeah, I was doing research on mycorrhizal fungi in Southern California, and there's some of my mentors around mycorrhizae had done studies where they actually determined that mycorrhizal networks extended like 30 feet through the desert, penetrated bedrock to get to groundwater, and send water from the groundwater in the desert, like 100 feet below, all the way up to the oak trees that were living in the desert. And that's the only way those oaks could survive in the desert. So yeah, mycorrhizae are really, really good at gathering water through their extensive networks, right? So this picture is of a little pine sapling, or you can really kind of conceptualize that. So you can see the pine with just its own root system, and then the pine with the mycorrhizal fungus, in this case an ectomycorrhizae. So it just greatly expands the root zone, essentially, of the plant. There's another way that specifically arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi help plants access water. Does anyone know about this really special protein? Okay, glomalin is this really cool protein that arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi produce. It's really sticky. This is what it looks like. This is just a microscopic image of glomalin, and then here's another image. So yeah, glomalin basically gloms soil together. So it's part of why AMF help with soil aggregation, so help make soil really healthy. They basically put out all this glomalin into the root zone of plants, and that glomalin essentially holds on to moisture in the root zone of plants where it's needed. Glomalin is also responsible for a third of soil carbon storage. So that glomming effect really helps with soil health. Like I said, soil aggregation, helping soil stick together, which prevents erosion, which helps plants access water, which stores carbon in soils for a really long time, and so many other benefits. So the major ways that these mycorrhizae are helping their plant partner through access to nutrients, especially phosphorus and water, but they're also helping protect against pathogens and disease. So you can imagine this mycorrhizal network around the roots of the plants is just kind of like, I don't know, a fortress around the plant root, right? So if it's a root-borne pathogen, it's going to be hard for that pathogen to get in to the root, right, to access the plant. But another way that mycorrhizae protect their plant partner from pathogens and disease is by giving them a heads up. So this happens on larger spatial scales. So like you have a forest and there's pine beetle or something on one side of the, I don't know, there's some pathogen or pest on one side of the forest. Through the mycorrhizal network and chemical signals, they will kind of give a heads up to the plants over yonder so that they can get their defenses up and protect themselves. So these are some of the major ways that mycorrhizae, it's a trade relationship. It's thought to be mostly symbiotic, so like mutually beneficial. But it's a really dynamic relationship, and we're still learning a lot more about these relationships. This is also kind of a diagram showing and comparing and contrasting the different AMF and EMF, ectomycorrhizal fungi, just to again show the ectomycorrhizae really forms this like sheath around the plant root, and then grows around the cells and trades that way, whereas the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus actually penetrates the root cells themselves and does their trading that way. Does anyone know which of these types of mycorrhizae are generalists? Like if we sampled the roots of all of these plants around us, do you think they'd be mostly AMF or mostly EMF? EMF? Why? I mean, you're right. You're right. One of these is a generalist, but it's actually the AMF is the generalist. So AMF forms relationships with like 80% of all plants. So most agricultural plants, grasses, fruit trees, oak tree, even a lot of like perennial woody species. Whereas ectomycorrhizal fungi only form associations with like 3 to 10% of all plants, and it's mostly conifers. So mostly long-lived trees, especially conifers. But even a lot of conifers form arbuscular relationships, especially early on in their lives. So all that to say, we're actually going to be focusing heavily on how to cultivate AMF, because probably most of y'all will be wanting to, you probably want to have a mix of AMF and EMF in your nursery or farm or, you know, tree planting project or whatever it may be. But you definitely want to make sure the AMF are there, because even species that for the duration of their lives will probably be ectomycorrhizal, they often get their little start with arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. Who are the generalists, who are kind of just like pretty much associate with all types of plants, except for Brassica family and the Chenopodiaceae. How do you say that? The spinach family, Chenopodiaceae.
What is it about brassicas that keeps them from being able to have that same kind of relationship?
I don't know. They just didn't get on the bus. I don't know why. I don't know why, because they get messed up by fungal diseases a lot. So maybe if they did form that relationship. Yeah, there's a lot of cool, we're really focusing on the practical methods today, but there's a lot of really interesting stuff about mycorrhizae. Like, it's hypothesized that anyways, like plant roots are different because of this relationship that formed a long time ago. And plants were like, you know what? Okay, we don't need to like focus too much on developing our root system because we got mycorrhizae for that. So we'll, you know, so there's a lot of really interesting stuff. I don't know why some plants chose not to make that relationship. The other thing I will say though, y'all are into mycology, probably not surprised to hear that like these fungi really defy a lot of categorization. They like sharing kind of like what I've been taught, what's kind of the like thought to be the case, but these are really dynamic relationships. And I've seen brassicas that have formed mycorrhizal relationships. So yeah, they're just kind of generalizations that we're talking about today. Yes.
Commercial inoculants, those tend to be
Well, it depends. Usually it'll say endo. This is a great question. Yeah, so if it says endomycorrhizae, that means arbuscular mycorrhizal, because endo is inside. So usually you can either buy an endo blend, an ecto blend, or an endo-ecto mix. Yeah, but I will say, yeah, there's been a lot of meta-analyses done where they looked at basically like every mycorrhizal inoculation study that's been done. And these meta-analyses have generally found that commercial inoculums are not effective. And that's why I'm here, to partially teaching y'all how to essentially create your own inoculum, because commercial inocula don't tend to work. Can anyone guess why they might not work? Yeah, exactly. It could, maybe they get heated up in transit or something and just they're dead by the time you get them. Any other thoughts?
They need a lot of like biodiversity.
Yes, it does. That's a really good point. Yes, definitely biodiversity is resilience. So if you're crafting an inoculum, you want to have a diverse blend, because you don't know which one or a few of those will end up doing best in the environment that you put them into. So it's safer to have a big blend. But what about, I mean, yeah, the main reason they tend to not work is because they can't compete with what's already there. So, so that actually, yeah, partially because maybe they're just not adapted. You know, there's there's in North America, there's only like a few facilities that produce mycorrhizal inoculum, and if it's not in your bioregion, they just might not be adapted, specifically. But also, if you're applying these in like a farm or something, or there's just probably a lot of other microbes. If you're applying them in a farm where you fertilize, the plant is not likely to trade something that it can get for free, right? So if you're farming and you're adding like NPK fertilizer, the plant has no really need to form a relationship, a lifelong relationship to get that, what it's already being given, So these are some of the reasons why commercial inoculate tend to not work very well. But luckily you can create it yourself pretty easily. It just takes a few months. Yeah, I already talked a bit about why you want mycorrhizae, but definitely if any of you are doing ecological restoration, I can't tell you how I've is anyone here involved in ecological restoration stuff? Yeah. Have you had pretty good survival of plants?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Nice.
not without, but we do
Yeah.
inoculate, but our colony died.
Yeah.
We can't regrow it.
Okay. Yeah. So without restoring the soil microbiome essentially, as well as when you're restoring plant systems, they just tend to die. So I've seen a lot of restoration projects where they have like greater than 90% mortality of what was planted, and that's like super common. And it's probably because of these relationships are not present to support these plants in like harsh conditions. So for anyone, I do a lot of remediation, so working on really contaminated sites to address the pollution, and just truly plants will not grow if you don't have the mycorrhizal fungus. They also protect plants from heavy metal stress, from drought, from salinity in the soil, from heat stress, from changing conditions.
Where there's been fire recently.
The fire probably killed the mycorrhizal fungi, unfortunately. These guys are pretty sensitive. So they're pretty sensitive to disturbance. Sorry?
Sorry, how hot of a fire?
I mean, I'm trying to think of the exact temps. I think higher than 100 is I've had inoculum that was sitting in my car die, so just to get, so I think anything higher than even 100 degrees would potentially kill them in their spore form, right? Once they're established, they can be a little more resilient, but but why do you want mycorrhizae? Yeah, they really will just help your plants survive and grow a lot better. There's a lot of studies showing increases in plant biomass and survivability when mycorrhizae are present. Resilience against climate change and extreme conditions, toxic conditions. They also prevent erosion, and not only by helping the plants thrive, which prevents erosion too, but again, AMF producing that glomalin and really helping soil aggregate and stick together really helps prevent erosion. There's so many reasons to make sure you have these mycorrhizae present. So then you might wonder, well, do you need to add them? They're probably already there. Unless you've been, again, kind of farming with repeat, heavy machinery tilling, frequent fertilizer application. If it's a site where there's been herbicides and pesticides sprayed, also they might be not present. Another thing, if it's been paved, if it's a site that's been under concrete for a long time, or contaminated site, they probably are sparsely present. But the problem is they can't repopulate unless they have access, unless the site is close enough to like an undisturbed area, like a forest that's been left kind of wild for a long time. So if you have a nursery, like if you're propagating plants in a nursery kind of setting, you definitely, yes, need to add them because they wouldn't be present in like your standard potting soil or soil mix. Yeah, if you're working on ecological restoration of any kind of degraded or polluted site, definitely need to add them. They're probably not there. Yeah, and then if you're, yeah, again, if you're trying to kind of restore soil health in an agricultural setting where there have been any of those disturbances or applications, then you probably want to add them too.
You mentioned like it's been seen in bedrock. Does it take a really long time and you wouldn't see it in concrete? Possibly. And like
That's a cool question. Yeah, I wonder if they can grow through concrete. I guess maybe no one's ever looked. Maybe they can, but that would be the extra radical mycelium rather than the spores. Yeah, I wonder if they can grow through concrete. That's a cool question. So yeah, where to source inoculum? Kind of the inverse of what I just said, like the types of sites you would need to add them. So basically any undisturbed wild area is a good place to source inoculum. So somewhere that hasn't had pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides sprayed in like a decade or more. Yeah, pretty undisturbed area. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the culture that you want to grow in propagule format. So when we're talking about mycorrhizae, we're talking about spores. Spores is the main kind of like propagule. Yeah. So inoculum is just like, yeah, the mother culture of what you want to grow that you, yeah, then introduce into its, yeah, you introduce to expand and keep expanding. Thanks. Does that make sense? Was that a good, okay. Did you have a, okay, cool. So yeah, but the other thing is about where to source inoculum. So it's an undisturbed area but you need to go to the root zone of, so you want to dig up some soil basically in the root zone. You should be seeing like roots. That's how you know it's the root zone. If you get little chunks of roots, that's good. So for this workshop, we went and collected, like April said, from around the roots of the exact same trees that they are going to be propagating in their program. And we just found like old trees in kind of undisturbed areas. So it's kind of a fun project to go scoop some inoculum. You'll see the inoculum later. Yes. That's a good question. I mean, there will be, well, actually, let's go through the life cycle and then that'll basically answer that. But yeah, you can do it any time of year. There should be spores because technically these relationships are actually so dynamic that apparently they're forming and sporulating and reforming like daily. But yeah, you're going to have more spores in the soil during the time of year when the plant is dormant, if it's a perennial, if it does go dormant, or if it's an annual, a few weeks after the annual has died, fallen over. Yeah, and so so the life cycle for arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi is that, so there will be a spore in the soil. That's another picture with a whole bunch of different arbuscular mycorrhizal spores. It's not true to size. You can't really see them with your naked eye. The spore will germinate once it is in the presence of a root, a plant root that's alive and that it can form a relationship with. And there's this cool like chemical consent that happens supposedly where the plant is kind of releasing these carbon and other basically chemicals into the soil, being like, hey, I would like to form a mycorrhizal relationship. And then the spore in the picking up on that signal germinates. It's like, okay, we can form a relationship here, and starts to grow some mycelium, and penetrates the root of the living plant, sets up their little trading post thing, and then continues to grow until, and expanding mycelium into the soil to do its scavenging, sending the nutrients and such back to trade with the plant. If it becomes aware that their plant host is dying or becoming dormant, then the life cycle switches to focus on sporulation. And that's because it's like, okay, my source of nourishment is dying. I need to go build some new relationships. So it'll focus on releasing spores. So yeah, that's why, if it's an annual plant, the best time where you get the most spore load would be after the plant has had its season and been cut down or fallen over. If it's perennial, you can harvest pretty much any time to get a good amount of spores. Yeah. For this is the life cycle for arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. The thing with ectomycorrhizae is that some of them form mushrooms. Does anyone know an example of a ectomycorrhizal fungus that produces mushrooms? Yeah, chanterelles. A lot of ones we like to eat and forage for, actually. Boletes, matsutake, truffles. What else? There's so many. Most of the mushroom, well, maybe not most. Amanita, muscaria, all amanitas. A lot of mushrooms that we go foraging for, or you see popping up, are actually fruiting from the mycorrhizal network connected to a nearby tree. So their propagation looks a little different because the spores are not released in the soil like with the AMF. They're released from the actual mushroom fruit body. So we'll talk about how to make ectomycorrhizal spore slurries, which is like pretty easy. But then mostly today we're going to go through, we're mimicking this arbuscular mycorrhizal life cycle in how we cultivate them. Like from a mushroom? From an ectomycorrhiza? So it looks like this. So it kind of like the spores, they kind of get formed on the hyphae, on the mycorrhizal mycelium. And then again, like break off, germinate. Sometimes ants carry them around. Sometimes insects will help them move around, but they mostly like move through just mycelium. The mycelium has to spread, and then they form along the mycelium. Yeah.
You said that's which kind of fungi does that?
AMF.
Some mushrooms are EMF?
Not all, not in general, but yes. But no mushrooms ever form from arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They just do not do that. They just do not reproduce that way. But yeah, many ectomycorrhizal fungi reproduce through fruiting a mushroom and spreading spores that way. But not all mushrooms. Like there's decomposers that instead just grow on, fruit from a dead tree or something like that. But it's actually interesting. Yeah, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi do not produce enzymes. Like they truly get all of their food from all of their carbon from their plant host. It's really important. Like they cannot survive in any way without a plant. that will relate with them. Whereas ectomycorrhizal fungi, how they get nutrients from the soil is they put out enzymes that break down leaf litter and organic matter, and then they trade some of that. So it also means they're a little more resilient. They can survive a little bit even without their plant host giving them carbon, because they can decompose and get that themselves.
So that the mushroom was attached to some nearby tree.
Yeah.
Does it only get to attach to one? Is it like mushroom tree association? Or is it attached to another?
Oh, the mycorrhizal networks can all be interconnected. Yeah, it's super dynamic. Yeah, so you can have like with one single tree, you could have like one part of it, there's some ectomycorrhizal fungi, connected to another network, and then there's like an AM network, and then if you expand that out, they're all just kind of interweaving and dying, reforming, figuring out how to relate, weaving together. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So let's see. Should we take a little break before we get into the cultivation stuff? How do people?
There's a restroom here.
Yeah, why don't we take just a short break, and then the next section is just going through all the methods. We'll talk through it, and then we will actually go and do it together.